Testing. Hello. Hi. How are you all? Good. Oh, that's good. Welcome. We're going to talk about the MFA in Directing at NIDA for about half an hour. My name's Ben Shostakovsky, and I'm the head of directing here at NIDA and the course leader. And what I'd love to do is just to chat through basically the course structure, how it all unfolds over 18 months, some of our key projects and subjects, so you can understand if you were to do the Masters in Directing, what your journey would be like over 18 months. And then I'll invite up two of our recent graduates as well, who are just down the front here, Mema Marley and Ryan Whitworth-Jones. So you can also hear from people who have just gone through the course in the last few years and what the experience is actually having done the training. But what a lot of people want to know is, once you do the training, what's next once you graduate, and how do you forge the career as a director? So it'd be good to ask them a couple of questions as well. We'll also open to the floor if you have any questions for us, and we're joined by people online as well. So hi to everyone who's online. Welcome. So one of the first questions we get with the Masters is, who is it that can apply? So a Masters is a postgraduate degree, meaning that it requires you to have completed at least an undergraduate degree already before you can apply. If you haven't completed an undergraduate degree, at least having 5 years experience in the area, that can be an equivalent which would enable you to be able to apply at that level. The undergraduate degree can be in any field whatsoever. It doesn't need to be an arts undergraduate at all. In fact, we've had people who have applied with science undergrads or law undergrads or all sorts of things that they're interested in, and they're wanting to pivot. So that life experience is still super useful. The people we're looking for are early career professionals, so people who have been starting to make work or think about work, whether that's stage work or screen work. You don't necessarily need to have been the director on those projects with a capital D. You might have been a collaborator or a bunch of people who got together to make a short film or something like that. But we're looking for people who are burgeoning in their career and ready to really level up their process and their skills in the directing craft. We're looking for people who are inherently strong collaborators. So the role of a director, unlike potentially some images of a director or an auteur, Hollywood director or something like that, or somebody who works by themselves, huddled away in a corner, couldn't be further from the truth. Particularly in directing when you're working in live performance, it's an incredibly collaborative art form, and the director has to be an expert collaborator first and foremost before they can bring any piece of work to life. So we're really interested in meeting people who love working with other people. We're looking for artists who have diverse and distinct voices about what's important to them, so that when we're training, the future directors for the Australian and international industries, you have people who are actually able to step forward and speak about something that they're really passionate about, whatever that is, and to be able to put out those stories to build a kind of more cohesive and collaborative and communicative society. All right, so I'll just go through the course overview in summary. Welcome everyone who's just joined us. If you want to take a seat or stand, whatever suits you. The projects, we start off at the beginning of the course looking at text-based theatre. And we spend a decent term where each of the 7 directors who do the MFA course work on the rehearsal room floor as actors for each other. And one at a time, each of the student directors will lead scene work, direct scene work, and essentially have time to experiment and figure out what it's like to be a director on the floor with other actors, and to figure out how to communicate as clearly as you can. And that whole process is to learn one particular directing methodology. That methodology, we feel like, helps center the actor's work in your rehearsal process, and it's also predicated on you being deeply researched in the text that you're directing. So you're able to guide everyone through with a really deep knowledge about what the material is. You've done your research, you understand the lineage of the story that you're telling, and then you can be in the center of the room working with your peers, bringing something completely unique to life with confidence. So we begin there at the top of the course, but then we start to branch out into different artistic mediums, sometimes in smaller, kind of more rough and ready versions of things, so that you can test your directorial skill in different form. One of those is in opera directing, which is a very kind of particular style of directing, and we feel like one of our main hopes with that intensive and opera intensive we do is to demystify for directors what it is to be an opera director, that it doesn't need to be something kind of highfalutin and scary, but it's simply a director who's able to work with singing actors and music and live music as much as any other art form that you might collaborate with. So we do that project in collaboration with some artists from Opera Australia each year, and that helps just branch away into a different form, and that can lead to full careers for people who are interested in that area. Year after year, we're continuing to build our capacity to be teaching screen directing as well inside the course. The biggest project that we've got for screen directing at the moment is our collaboration with Triple J Unearthed. And each year we collaborate with the design course to create 7 music video clips for emerging artists who win a competition through Triple J. So that, again, is a real world situation where directors have to build a team, they have to build a crew, they have to find a director of photography, a cinematographer, and essentially foray into the world of independent filmmaking. And they have an artist at the center who isn't themselves, it's the musician, and they kind of have a job of looking after that musician and their brand and getting something interesting out there to help get their careers started. Another area that we look at, which in the last few years has been completely connected to First Nations storytelling and collaborating, is a devised week where we take the 7 directors and some designers up to Darkinjung country in Gosford, and we collaborate with our mates at NIDA, who are an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander dance training academy. A lot of their graduates end up performing and working with companies like Bangarra, and so that opportunity allows us to, led by First Nations elders and practitioners, spend time to actually understand what it is to be an emerging Australian artist and how you might connect with the First Nations history and way of thinking, actually, which is very, very different to what you might get in a standard university training. So this is just, again, going over the structure with a little bit more detail. The course is 18 months full-time. So we work from February right up until June of the following year. We work 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. every day as a base. And then if you're working on creative projects, you might do technical rehearsals that move into nighttime or productions on the weekend and things like that. So we're very upfront in saying to people who are interested in applying, it's a very, very big commitment. You commit for 18 months, your entire life, to do this course, and we believe that's how you get the very best out of it. Across the course, these are our subjects, and you can check them out online. There's some drop-downs online with what actually unfolds in each and every one of those subjects. I'll just go through them super briefly for you. Directing techniques is what it says on the box. It's a bunch of tools and processes, for ways for you to work in the room, and that covers directing process, dramaturgical process, in terms of understanding script and that type of material, as well as leadership skills and communication skills. Directing practice is the fun bit. That's where you actually get to put into practice what you've been learning. And that houses, a short play project that we do, the Triple J collaboration, the opera intensive where we work on directing an aria with a singer. And then finally, your final practical project is the major directing project, which is its own subject. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail in a moment, but that's the capstone of the directing course here at NIDA, where you work on a 40-minute fully realized production with your colleagues here in the school, and you present it to the public. In the master's course as well, you'll get access to the beginnings of what constitutes practice-based research, which is super useful information for you and necessary really at a master's level for you to be able to have tools at your disposal to use your practice and the things that you make and the way that you make things as a site for understanding more about art making process and more about the world. These are the fun things that we do. We do a bunch of fun things. At the beginning, as I said, we do a methodology intensive. That is, I'm sure Mema and Ryan, when they talk to you about it, it's delightful and painful and wonderful, and there's a huge amount of learning that happens for everyone. You've got directors on stage performing as actors who sometimes have never done that, which is terrifying for them. Or sometimes they just won't get off the stage. They enjoy it that much. But it's a chance for us to, in a very kind of safe, experimental space, try out a bunch of things and to learn by trying and failing and trying again. So it's a very important part of our course and is kind of the foundation of the whole directing training that we do here, that methodology intensive. As I said, you kick off by, in your first term, directing a short play. That's kind of at the end of that intensive. You get to put into practice what you've been learning with actors on the floor. Throughout the course as well, NIDA does 3 major play production seasons. We do one in winter, one in spring, and then the final one is in the beginning of your second year, which is the Festival of Emerging Artists, and that's where the directors' graduation shows sit. So in winter and spring, you also work alongside our guest industry directors as an assistant director. And some of those productions you might have seen are happening right now in the building with our actors and the other disciplines across the school making those shows. So you get 2 full cycles essentially of working with an industry director, helping them realize that show, meeting the actors, meeting the designers, the makers, the set construction builders, the technicians, and building your network of creative colleagues over 2 productions. I spoke briefly about the music video. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The opera intensive we've spoken about, and the directing project. Another thing that sits inside the course, which comes towards the end of the 18 months, is that we work with you to set up an international industry placement of some description so that you can take what it is that you've learnt outside of Australia, this country, and connect with different cultures and different ways of working and different companies or artists that you'd be really interested to learn from. So that might be a particular director that you know who's working out in the world. Could be film, television or stage. It could be a form like circus, companies like Cirque du Soleil. It really depends on what it is that you're looking to, where you're looking to position your career as director. And we do our best to connect you with those people and get you in those rehearsal rooms. And then I mentioned finally our collaboration with NIDA, with the First Nations Dance Training Company at Gosford, which is, again, another very important part of the course that we're quite proud of. Okay, I'll just chat through these 2 practical projects in a little bit more detail. They tend to be projects that people want to know a little bit more about, and then I'll invite Ryan and Mema to come up. We might ask them a couple of questions, and you can ask them questions as well. So the Triple J project, this is a collaboration we've had with the ABC for well over a decade now, and it continues, even though the budgets don't continue to grow, the project continues to grow, and the ambition of the directors and the designers continues to grow as well. So long story short, with this collaboration, Triple J Unearthed puts out a competition, which they call the NIDA Music Video Competition, and their unearthed artists can apply by putting their music forward, and a bunch of panelists from Triple J choose exciting new musicians or bands who they think deserve some more attention, and then they give us those 7 bands and songs, and we commit to making 7 new music video clips for those artists. It's a very rough and ready independent style process, but we guide the directors and designers through that whole process with screen directors or music video directors who are able to speak to them about their experience and things that they learnt on the job, so that you feel kind of well and truly supported to deliver that music video. Then that premieres on Rage, on ABC's Rage program, which you might see at 2 in the morning sometimes for those who still watch TV. But then it gets released to the world, all of those music video clips, and they go on social media all over the place. So the exciting thing about that for your training is that before you leave, you've already got at least one screen credit under your belt as well for you to start to build a career in that area. Some of our graduates completely just fall into music video film directing once they fall in love with this project. So it really is an exciting form to deal with because it's non-narrative, or it doesn't have to be narrative. So directors and designers can be really experimental with how they align the music and imagery and come up with something really compelling. And then the final project I want to talk about is the Directors Grad Show. So that's housed in a festival that we call the Festival of Emerging Artists. This is an image of one of the productions, which was excerpts from Lucy Preble's The Effect that we staged this year. In a really exciting development for these projects, the third-year acting course students who are going to graduate by the end of that year, they join us as the casting pool for the directors' grad shows. So before you leave, you'll be collaborating and directing the BFA actors, or some of them, inside your production, which is a really great moment to meet those actors and work with them. And you will develop with a designer a design concept, and we'll build the set for your production. You'll rehearse the production, you'll technically rehearse the production, and then preview it and release it to the world to see, which is a huge kind of learning opportunity for everyone, but a really exciting way to kind of cap off your training at the top of your second year. This information's available online, but we're aware that to study and commit to a master's course of this kind is a big commitment. So NIDA's been doing a bunch of work in the last 24 months, even a huge amount of work to really boost the scholarships available to people who are applying, to be able to support people to do the course and make it that little bit more realistic for those who might not be able to otherwise. So please do check that information out on the website. And there's a bunch of scholarships which are specific to the MFA Directing and Dramatic Writing courses as well. So you can have a look at that. It's time. Please let me introduce Ryan Whitworth-Jones and Mema Marley, everyone. Thanks for joining us, you two. So both graduates of the MFA in Directing course, can I invite you to please just introduce yourselves and a little bit about who you are and the type of work you make?
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a proud Wiradjuri man, and I guess I'm a interdisciplinary artist. I work across, I work primarily as a creative producer and director, and I work across multiple live performance mediums and visual arts, and I currently have just started a new job as the creative producer and artistic associate at ATYP.
That's really recent, isn't it?
Yeah, like 3-4 days ago.
Congrats.
Thank you.
I only know because I got the reference call.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Mema. Since leaving NIDA, I've predominantly worked for new work, so working with playwrights who have just started writing or have been writing for a couple of years but haven't had that piece up. I really kind of enjoy collaborating with the writer themselves, and I've kind of found my niche working really closely with writers and other creatives. And I've also worked for a couple of documentary companies in that kind of realm, supporting directors with research.
Great, thank you. Can I start with, we're talking about the methodology intensive at the top. That's the foundation of our course, where we, get stuck in rigorously to understand what might a director actually do second by second in a room with actors for 5 weeks. What is that process? Can you speak a little bit to your experience of that way of learning that methodology at the top of the course?
Yeah, I think so. I came into NIDA with zero directing experience, and so the kind of 5-week intensive with the fellow directors was really useful for me to kind of actually understand what directors do in a room, and how they interact with actors, but also with other creatives. The intensive itself focuses on a director's relationship with the text and with the actors, and that just allowed us to really interrogate what a director needs to be across. What do they need to read for in a text? How do they talk to actors? How do you communicate with fellow directors? And it really just gave me that vernacular to navigate what a director actually does in a room.
And for you, Ryan, thanks, Mema.
Yeah, I think for me that intensive methodology that we're taught right at the beginning has been kind of the bedrock and foundation for all the work that I've come to, particularly because that it's such a solid foundation, not only just working on how to build relationships with people and set the tone in a room, but the methodology for me is so important because it's how can we honor a story and support it in a visual sense as much as possible, and that requires like in-depth analysis of a text, and something that I've felt in my practice anyway is that I always come back to that, no matter the medium that I'm working in. I always come back to it because it's just such a strong foundation for understanding the work that you're creating.
Great. And can you chat, if you think about some of the different projects? Actually, no, I'll talk about something different. I'd love to hear a little bit about, throughout the course, when you do the collaborative projects, you meet the other people who are studying here, the other artists who are actors or directors or designers, writers. I'd love to hear about your individual experience of meeting artists and how you build a network to collaborate once you graduate.
Yeah, I think NIDA, my biggest takeaway from NIDA was really that network, that you get to collaborate with the designers, with the actors, with the props department, with the set people as well. And so you're really immediately exposed to people that will enter the industry with you. And that was really exciting. I think through NIDA, through the little projects you have, you'll slowly start meeting more and more people as you go along. And then since leaving NIDA, kind of everything that I've worked on or collaborated with other people has been through a connection of someone I've known from NIDA during my time. And so those kind of connections are really valuable, but also they allow you to support one another in the industry. And again, you kind of learn what a director does as you collaborate with other artists, which is really lovely.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think what was so important about those collaborations is, from a directing perspective, with all the different projects you do at NIDA, it really is a time where you get to experiment and play, but also by working with those other collaborators, you really start to understand the different processes that different artists have, and it makes you more adaptable, particularly when you leave. I think going into the industry and starting to work with different people, you're able to adapt so much more easily to other people's creative processes because you've had that experience of working with such a variety of different people. And yeah, I think once you leave, you come back to that network all the time because you have an innate understanding of how people work, but also like for some of those creatives that you really do like have a real good shorthand on how to chat to each other, so it expedites a lot of the decision-making process because you've worked together before, so it's really great.
Great. And one last question. People who are listening online or in the room might be interested in applying. It'd be good for you to talk from your own points of view a little bit about what your process was like to apply to do the course, and maybe anything that you felt was demystified once the interview happened and the recall happened. Are you able to chat a little bit to that, both of you?
Of course. So I, as I mentioned earlier, hadn't done directing before. I had actually studied philosophy and politics. And so applying to the course, I had kind of put in an application and not really expected to hear much back. I hadn't come to the open day, so this is hopefully encouraging and demystifying that process for everyone here. But yeah, I think in my process, when you're applying, I'm not sure if it's still similar, but you kind of talk about a play that you've seen recently, how you might have directed it differently, what that looks like. And for me, I had just seen a couple of plays, and so that was a really exciting thing to kind of actually delve into and immediately start asking yourself the questions of, oh, what is my voice? What do I have to say about a piece of existing text? So already the application was kind of already prompting what kind of director I might be. And then meeting Ben and at that point Amara Savage was incredible. And doing that recall, they kind of prompt you with different, they set you up with 2 actors and allow you to kind of direct them and then prompt you as you go along in the directing process. And so it's a bit of a test of how do you interact with actors in the room. And that was really comforting, actually, to do. It was a really kind of comforting environment and really instilled a lot of belief and confidence. So that was actually a really lovely process to kind of come back and do a recall.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. So my background, I came from education. I'd been a teacher for a good decade. And so I put an application in, but didn't. I had a very similar thing. If I get a call back, that's great. But didn't kind of have any expectation of it. And I think for me, that process was really insightful because it's the application is a provocation of what is the work that you want to create, why do you want to create it, and then also starting to think like logistically, where would it be, like why would it be in that theatre, or why is it good for that audience. So the application process, I found, started to spark in me, this is the kind of work that I'd be interested in creating. This is where I think my artistic voice that I'd like to explore while I'm at NIDA is going to head. And then once we got into kind of that interview and audition process, working with the actors on the floor I found really invaluable, because I think I was very nervous because I was like, well, I'm not really coming from an arts background, I'm coming from a teaching background. And I was very conscious at the time of like, well, I don't want to sound like a teacher and be condescending in a room to actors. But what I loved about the audition process was that I was able to start to explore what I would be like in a room with actors, and they were very responsive, and it was just a very nurturing environment that like afterwards I was like, even if I didn't get in, I was like, that was just such an experience in itself that I took so much away from about leadership. So I feel like that process was just so important in the journey, I guess, and where I came from.
Great, thank you both. Thank you very much. That was great to hear from both of you. Can we open up, maybe if anyone's got any other questions for the panel or myself, here or online? Yep, down the front.
I was just wondering, when you came into the master's course, was there any medium in mind when you were directing, and how that changed throughout the course, whether it was theatre, film, TV, music videos?
I think for me, I was just so open to all the mediums and just really excited to kind of understand how they each actually function and what does behind the scenes look like. Because I'd only ever watched films or watched TV or watched theatre. So for me, it was just really understanding what does it all look like behind a curtain.
And I'll just quickly interject, because these two people are very humble, which is lovely, but it's not great when you're trying to explain how amazing they are and the things that they do. Mema, for example, hadn't done much theatre work before coming into the course. And sorry for speaking for you, but has just come out of rehearsal rooms with Judy Davis at Belvoir, and is about to then go and work on television. So Mema's a kind of example of the artists that we're hoping to build, which are directors who aren't dedicated to only one particular medium, but can build rich careers and move across different mediums. And Mema's starting to do that in her career already. Sorry to interrupt, Ryan.
I think for me, coming here, I had an idea of, like the Triple J project was something I was really excited for. And did love that project doing it, but I found actually I just really loved opera more. Like I just really loved directing opera. I thought that was, and I was really surprised. I didn't think that I would love it as much as I did. But it's the opera project for me that I was like, ah, that's like, it was so much fun.
Great. Thank you. Other questions?
We've got a question from online as well. What do you recommend for high school students who are looking to eventually get into directing?
You have so much of your life ahead of you. I think, anyone who comes into the master's course, of course, you've done maybe an undergraduate degree, but that could be in absolutely any field. Or you could be practicing as an artist for 5 years in different ways, and that makes you eligible to apply as well. Certainly won't be giving life advice besides do something that you actually are interested in. That's probably going to put you in the best position when you apply.
I was just wondering if you're doing a trade, are you able to apply for it, or?
It depends on how much experience you've got in and around the area, but after this chat, I'm going to be in the foyer for an hour. If anyone wants to chat about their particular background and where that sits, happy to have a chat.
Yep.
So I was just looking for, so I just know about the directing, but I just want to know how many students can allow in this course.
We take 7 students each year.
Would you unpack the leadership dimension, how you build up that capability? Is it naturally already something you have? Is it something that you can develop in the course? What do you need?
Yeah, I think you kind of develop it in the course. You develop it with your fellow directors in that kind of 5-week intensive. You kind of really quickly learn what kind of leader you are, what kind of leader your fellow directors are, and you can kind of mold yourself. I think the beautiful thing about this course is it doesn't tell you who you're meant to be from the get-go. You really are allowed to discover. A lot of the projects you do at NIDA, the parameters are set up for you, but what you do within the parameters is completely your own discretion. And so that's really exciting because you kind of get to test your voice, and then if it works, continue to develop that, or if it doesn't, kind of go, I'm going to shift in this way. And as Ryan kind of mentioned earlier, the beautiful thing about collaborating with all the other departments is when you're reading a text of work, there are 100 different interpretations. So you're talking to fellow collaborators, and they might have a completely different read of the play you're about to put up together. And then you kind of negotiate the vision together, and that's really exciting. And you kind of learn, do I want to be the kind of director that negotiates that vision with a collaborator? Do I want to come in with the vision, or what that process looks like? So it's, yeah, you kind of develop it through the course, and it's very much set up for you to test out different leadership styles.
I think it also helps that I think what's so great about the course in terms of leadership is that it's just so embedded. The people who come in, the people who teach the course really do model great leadership for us. So we're able to observe that, but also when we're also given experiences of being able to shadow another director in a space and see how they work, and that's so vital because every director has a completely different leadership style. And it's great because then you have the 7 other people, 6 other people in your cohort, and you often find that you end up having really good conversations about great leadership and how you've not only observed it, but how it helps you in your process. And then they also become a sounding board for when you're like, hey, I'm really struggling right now with this project, or what do you recommend I do? That's where I think it becomes a bit of an incubator as well, because your cohort are also there to help with that, as well as the amazing teachers who come in.
Actors are also really good measures. If a director's working with an actor doesn't understand, they'll tell you. And then you figure it out.
We've got another question from online. Is the Triple J project the only opportunity to work in a screen-based medium across the course?
We do an intensive before the Triple J music video clip, which is not about music videos per se. And then the project for Triple J lasts quite some time. There's a month of kind of developing the concept and pre-production, and then the second term is your shoot and then post-production. So it's a very significant time in the course, and beyond that, people usually in their international placements, if they're interested in film, that's where we start to tee up other experiences for them, which is screen specific.
Hello, thank you so much. It's lovely to listen to your experiences and all about the course. I'm curious to know whether there's assessments involved in the course, or is it just practice focused? Is it structured like a...
Yeah, so it's a coursework master's, which is different to a research master's. So most of your work, as you say, is doing and learning by doing, but there absolutely are assessments which are all aligned to the work that you do. But we try and make those assessments authentic to the work that you're doing, meaning your assessment might be about how your rehearsal room process, the way you've set up your rehearsal plan, and then the final showing. There are some academic aspects as well, which help set you up at that master's level. But as I said, most of the assessments are about the work that you'll be doing or work that you want to do in the future and that type of thinking. Yeah.
Hi guys, thanks so much for sharing your experiences. I would love to hear about how your life changed, I guess. Looking day to day, it's such a big, beautiful commitment, but is there anything you wish you knew going in about how the next 18 months would shape things and what it's like coming out the other side of that and going back to a more regular world?
Yeah, I think in terms of how it's structured, as Ben mentioned, you kind of do go back to like a university style day-to-day commitment. So it really is like a 9 to 6 for a lot of it. And then as you go through the course, as you're doing different projects, the kind of hours ease up depending on your person. That really then depends on how much you want to put in or how much you want to be in the building as you go through the course. But yeah, I think in terms of afterwards, I think when I first left NIDA, it was a big shock not to have that schedule and not to have a class to kind of come into or a building to kind of immediately be able to practice in. But NIDA is such an open door, even once you leave, that you can kind of constantly kind of come back, talk to the professors, talk to the teachers, talk to the other students here. And so you kind of like slowly start to develop your own schedule. So I think initially it was a bit of a shock to kind of leave and go, where's my time? Or what am I doing? Or why is no one telling me what assignment I have to do next? But you kind of develop it on your own. And then that's where it really comes back to having that strong network and collaborators where you can kind of pull people in together to create projects.
Yeah, I think the big thing that I noticed is the days at NIDA are very structured. And so even though you may be doing projects and things, you're still going to be having like a dramaturgy class, and there's a lot of work you do and a lot of preparation you have to do for things. And so being here, it provided a really great structure. I'm a person who loves structure in my life. But it provided a really great structure, and yeah, it was 9 to 6, and there were times where, you know, at June production season, sometimes we'd be here till 10 o'clock at night because we've got to get through a tech. And it may sound like a big commitment, but looking back and now that I'm out, I actually really think that strong, rigid structure that was provided really set me up for outside, because, you know, sometimes in the arts world, things aren't as structured as they need to be, and I guess that's where the director comes in and actually can put that structure in place, and it becomes really important, I guess, even more so when you're outside of the institution, because what they've given you is not only just how do you structure the day, but how do you project manage, and how do you do all of those different elements that come with the project management side of things. So I felt like being immersed in projects and having like class time, like dramaturgy and stuff, really kind of those first few terms were really pivotal in trying to understand how to build those skills for project management that I have needed later on.
Question down the front.
Just wondered what's important to you as directors when you're working with actors in rehearsal?
I think it's honestly creating a really comfortable environment. A lot of the time when you're working with a new text, or I mean, being an actor, being a creative in any kind of capacity is kind of vulnerable, especially and it's also exhausting to kind of have to perform night after night. And I think allowing that flexibility and that ownership for actors to kind of take ownership of the work that they're creating and autonomy on stage, that if they're performing it for the 16th time and they want to change up how they deliver a line or ad-lib or improv, you're creating a space where they feel comfortable and safe enough to do that in. I think that's really important, is establishing an environment where they feel comfortable doing something for the long term.
I also think openness and creativeness is really important for me in my rehearsal spaces anyway. I do, a lot of my practice has improvisation within it, which is a very scary thing for actors when I'm like, hey, let's improvise. But I find that if, like Mema said, if the tone of the room has been set and they feel like it's a safe space to be vulnerable, often if they're creating something really beautiful in an improvisation, it then becomes part of the show, really, because the creativity that they've got unconsciously is probably better than something that I could craft. And so I love the collaboration side of things, where they're open enough to make offers and I'm open enough to have that conversation to see if that offer can fit in the work that we're creating.
We've got another question online. How much of directing involves a storytelling aspect and personal vision?
I think that kind of
It's
depends.
an 18-month course.
Yeah, yeah. I think it depends on the project. It depends on the fellow collaborators you're working with. It really is kind of a situation by situation.
Yeah, but to not dismiss the question, the director naturally puts, a bunch of their personal ideas and way of seeing the world into the work and meets that with the other artists that they're bringing their own ideas.
Hi there. I was just wondering what skills and experience outside of the course you think have helped you become a good director?
Oh, do you have an answer?
Skills, I think for me, coming to the course as a teacher, a skill that helped me was organisation, just because you have to be organised as a teacher. So I felt like that's really helped. But I also think that no matter what industry you come from, you would have an innate understanding of what a good leader is and what a bad leader is, and you probably have worked under both before. So I think, like, for me anyway, that observational skill is great to have. And then even outside in the workplace now, things that skills that I think that are really important to have is great communication skills and empathy. I think empathy is really important in the work that we do.
Yeah, I think kind of piggybacking off the empathy part, I think having studied like philosophy and politics, kind of being really open to different perspectives, I think that really kind of helped me in the course, just kind of understanding that you're dealing with stories and these stories are particular perspectives, they're one version of them, and so kind of remaining open and also just respecting that you are telling usually someone's either lived experience or a fictionalization of something that taps into something that is universal. So just treating it with that kind of openness and respect. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we're at the end of the road now. Thank you very much to Mema and to Ryan for joining us. And as I said, I'm going to be sitting out in the foyer under the directing banner for an hour now. If you wanted to come and ask any questions you've got, we look forward to meeting those of you who are going to apply. Thanks very much.